We had some spirited debate and conversation.
Yeah, always.
But it's fun, man. It's fun. It's invigorating, Bloom.
Well,
Oh,
it
and
should
football.
be. Democracy should be full contact. Well, I mean, not truly, literally full contact, but it should be passionate. And that's what makes it work, really.
That's what makes it great. What makes football great is you and me and our audience and everybody here. It is the Audible coaching carousel. I feel like there should be some carousel music like in the background.
Yep.
Here we go. And then I always am reminded, like, I was never allowed to ride carousels. And that's probably what started the whole thing, right? Because my dad would always be like, you got horses at home. I was like, I just wanted to ride the carousel. So now I get to talk about the carousel, the coaching carousel around the NFL. But before that, the big game is here. Kansas City versus Tampa Bay. New customers can play for free for the $1 million prize with their first deposit, thanks to our partnership with DraftKings. 1, create your DraftKings DFS account and make a deposit. 2, DraftKings will credit your account with the free contest entry. 3, draft your lineup and compete for the $1 million top prize. Just go to dkng.co/big game. That's dkng.co/big game. Enter now. Offer ends on 2/7 at kickoff. Minimum $5 deposit eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for full terms and conditions. All right, Bloom. We're going to go over this coaching carousel, which includes GM carousels, and well, maybe we'll wrap up with a co-offensive coordinator situation.
I know.
Which is interesting, and we'll get to all that. But let's start in Hotlanta, and we'll start with what they've done with Arthur Smith, Dave Ragone. We talked about him on this show when he played, and then Terry Fontenot as their GM, guy that the Broncos interviewed. Very smart, very wise with the eye for talent. So Atlanta, and by the way, Bloom, my intel, my team sources have said that Arthur Blank, 1, is still bitter about the Super Bowl loss. 2, he bristles at the thought of letting Matt Ryan go this year. But 3, he did say it'll be up to Fontenot. So Arthur Blank would like to keep Matt Ryan around, and maybe they draft Justin Fields and then groom him for a year behind Matt Ryan. But anyway, let's talk about these changes at the top of the structure for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, and like you said, maybe the more interesting than any coaching change is what will Atlanta do with number 4 with respect to the quarterback. And the Matt Ryan, Julio Jones era is probably over in 2022. Is there a quarterback? I think we're going to see a quarterback at number 2 if the Jets don't get Deshaun Watson. You're into this more Deshaun Watson Broncos stuff, by the way, Cecil, Kareem Jackson.
Yeah.
Anyway, all these moving pieces, right? But you get Terry Fontenot, 2 third-round comp picks for. There's a debate, Cecil, or at least a hot button issue we can talk about. The NFL's new rule about compensatory picks whenever a minority candidate is hired out of your organization. Not rewarding the organization that hires the minority candidate for GM or head coach. But
which way should it be? Because I think all of us can agree, like, there needs to be an adjustment. You know, talking to Marshall Falk last night, and brought up his friend and mine, Eric Bieniemy, and we called it like it is. Like, and Chad Brown said this too. Like, you can't say that Eric Bieniemy not getting a head coaching job is 100% racism, but there are racist undertones or overtones to it. And what Marshall Falk said last night is like, we just need more black and brown coaches, black and brown executives, black and brown team owner. Like what? There's one minority owner, right? Shad Khan. That's something to look at and examine. So should it go? It should go to the team that harvested the talent, right? Like, because people say you should be rewarded. Well, then, teams would, because this is the NFL, it's a good old boy network. We know what that is. Like, they would just, or we're going to hire so we can get extra picks. No, hire because it's the right decision, right choice. And if you've brought up and harvested that talent, then you should get the compensatory picks for that.
Yeah, and I think that a couple of things, but not to turn this show into a show about the NFL and minority hiring. And it was and since we're talking coaching carousel, I mean, I guess this is the show to talk about it.
Right. Yeah.
It was a disappointing for head coaches. It was a disappointing cycle. However, this new rule, I think, it had to be structured the way it was, because if you rewarded the teams for hiring, then you create a perception that the minority candidates aren't good enough to be hired on their merits. Like you always say, Cease, I don't want to be hired because I'm a member of a minority group. I want to be hired because I'm good. Right. So there's no question, let's blow this out of the water. Atlanta hired away a personnel exec from New Orleans. They gave a rival, and you can say, well, they knew he was going to be hired somewhere else. Either way, if there was any disincentive based on that, this would have been the case for it to come up. It didn't. And it would have been unfair to the minority candidates who were hired to have the team rewarded for doing that, because then you create this perception that, well, without the reward, would they have been hired? Not that that would necessarily have been true. But know this, folks. Every time this subject comes up, I always want to say this, Cease. The NFL does not do this out of the goodness of their heart. The NFL doesn't do this because they're woke. They
don't do anything out of the goodness of their heart. They do it because of PR. Yeah,
well, and they do it because there was an actual problem that needed to be addressed. Mm-hmm. That this is not an invented race card kind of thing.
No, it's the good old boy network for a reason. And when people say I'm stuck on the Eric Bieniemy thing, sorry. Yeah. And full disclosure, I'm rooting for the Chiefs because I love EB. But for the people like, oh, he didn't interview well. You think Dan Campbell interviewed well? He's another quote Metallica. You flipping kidding me? Oh, he doesn't call plays, even though Mahomes has said that's wrong, and Andy Reid said that wrong because Reid will give him some drives. Nick Sirianni, who we'll get to, never called plays.
Right.
Oh, well, there's stuff in his background because at CU there is stuff in Eric Bieniemy's background. And then again, talking to Marshall Falk last night, I brought up Matt Patricia. I was like, there was something weird, creepy that was brought up the day he was hired. And then that was just shoveled away. Oh, yeah. So when we talk about this, and we're men, and we are going to talk about it realistically, when people say Bieniemy didn't interview well, that's BS. When people say there's stuff in his background, well, what about do you want me to bring up Vance Joseph? Do you want me to bring up Matt Patricia? Do you want me to bring up others who maybe the public doesn't know about? Like, do we really want to go there? So what is it really about? But the NFL, it's like player safety, Bloom. We really care. Do you?
Yeah, do you actually care, or do you feel like there's a position, a more advantageous position you could have on it? Anyway, getting back to the hire. So, Fontenot was hired first. You assume that he had some input or maybe made the call on Arthur Smith, but Arthur Smith was coveted. Everybody wanted Arthur Smith. Yes. And I don't necessarily know why, Cease. I don't know why. I mean, look, he did a tremendous job in 2019 creating an offense to maximize what the Titans had. In 2020, with little Greg Roman. Remember when Greg Roman was a hot name? Okay, you can do something to elevate what you have, but the NFL is never static, always in motion. You have to have a counterpunch. You have to have something. And it felt like, I don't know if Arthur Smith has that counter. He was a position coach and an offensive coordinator and a play caller, but he was coveted, highly, highly coveted. Interesting here that Dean Pease comes out of retirement again to join Arthur Smith, right? Dave Ragone, Bears quarterback coach. That's do I look at the Bears quarterback play and say, oh yeah, whoever's responsible for that is somebody that I want elevating my offense? I don't know. He was the passing game coordinator. I should give him credit for that. But again, the passing game coordinator in 2020 for the Bears is someone that deserves for promotion. So Falcons fans, this head scratch. I mean, I know Arthur Smith wasn't a head scratching hire because everybody wanted him. So in that sense, it made sense. But it's going to be a long process. And I think we will be checking it back in 2 or 3 years from now to see how this is going.
Okay, next up in the coaching carousel, there it is, Dan Campbell. There's Detroit. Holmes, great man, and people that know him, that I know, love his ability to do it. You start as a PR intern, and work your way up to GM. You got it, man. You got it. So Detroit, exciting, interesting. There's that's Aaron Glenn, right? Yeah. Because that's Nick's buddy. Nick Ferguson. So actually, I thought we'll get to the Jets hire, Bloom.
Yeah.
I thought when Robert Saleh got that job, I was like, he's going to hire Nick away because Nick worked for him for the 49ers. And I was like, huh, okay. I even pegged Nick about it on the air. So anyway, this is how it happens, right? Let's see what Detroit can do with this new group.
And this is one Cecil we can really see on its face where they're headed. Brad Holmes, folks don't know, from the Rams organization, came all the way up through the Rams organization, as you said. Cecil, through the hiring cycle, nobody generated more positive reaction than Brad Holmes. George Paton was close. We'll get to him. But Brad Holmes, when the Lions announced they hired him, the outpouring of they got a good one.
Yeah.
They got a good one. And I can't remember who it was who said they told people that's the next Ozzie Newsome. Brad Holmes is the next Ozzie Newsome. He said they told Ozzie, this guy's the next you. And you see the first move that he make. We talked about this on the News Note show. Go back for, I mean, you like the clarity of vision and the willingness to follow through already with this deal, the Stafford deal. And then you hire in Dan Campbell, and Dan Campbell is a flush. You know, what this franchise needs is an enema. You know, this is like an enema, right?
All right, Jack Nicholson,
right? I mean, Matt Patricia left a lot of toxic feelings and culture in his wake. I think it was Michael Lombardi that said that he thought he was Bill Belichick because he was a jerk, but Belichick may have been aloof to the media, but he was also genuine. He was real. Matt Patricia wasn't real. Dan Campbell's real. Dan Campbell doesn't know how to not be real. You know, I mean, he's too real. And look, by the way, that press conference was for the players. It wasn't for the fans.
Yep.
Wasn't for all of us media critics. It was for the players. All right. Anthony Lynn. I mean, it makes sense. Look, are they going to innovate? Are they going to turn the NFL on its head with new concepts? No. Anthony Lynn. No. However, you're going to change this culture, and a lot of former players, and Dan Campbell talked about this, you know, you look down this staff, a lot of former players, and he cited that he knows that these guys are hungry because they achieved a lot as players. Deuce Staley, the assistant head coach, you know, achieved a lot as players and then had to go all the way down to the bottom. I mean, he said Aaron Glenn talked about go get coffee, go pick up this guy at the airport.
Yep.
So that really says something about your personality, that you at one point, you know, getting millions of dollars and everybody was like, what do you want? What can I do for you? And then now you're back at the bottom of the organization where people are telling you to go do gopher jobs, and these guys work their way up. So you like that. You wonder about this kind of staff on offense when it comes to halftime adjustments or 1 week, one-off game plans, or any kind of innovation. But I think this franchise needed this reboot. You talk about Aaron Glenn coming from the Saints organization. A lot of people think he's going to be head coach in a couple of years, another former player. They got someone, Aubrey Pleasant, I think also from the Rams organization, who I think is going to be groomed to replace Glenn. So they've got a succession plan in place there. I think there's going to be a lot more for this franchise to be proud of in upcoming years. This might not be the staff. See, this staff feels like a Bill Cowher staff or a Jeff Fisher staff or something like that. So maybe a bit of an anachronism, a bit of a relic.
Ryan staff.
Yeah. It's not necessarily going to get you up to the point like Andy Reid or the talk of the league or Sean McVay or something like that. But anything is better than Matt Patricia.
Yes, that is I would say double true. And about Aaron Glenn and all those guys, former players have a stigma. I've talked to Chad Brown about this because he's been a coaching intern for like 4 or 5 different teams. There's a stigma for former players that they don't want to work. Nick's talked about it too, like, because he was a coaching intern with the 49ers. Like, oh, you're a former player, you don't want to work. And that's something that former players have to overcome. So shout out to Anthony Lynn won a Super Bowl with the Broncos as a player. So anyway, let's talk about Houston. We could have done an entire show on this. And yes, here's the latest. There's probably 4 teams that are serious about Deshaun. The Denver Broncos are one of them.
Yes.
And from what I know, they might be the most serious. So let's, just like the Matthew Stafford deal, Bloom, which we kept tabs on since November.
Yeah.
Like, let's keep tabs on this because it could take a while. It could take a while. So if you're a Broncos fan and you're like, why aren't they doing anything?
Denver, Miami Jets. You want to say who the 4th is? Can I get you to say it?
Hint? Ooh, a hint. How can I? Let me think of the proper hint.
Yeah. We can come back to
But let's talk about Houston.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be without Deshaun Watson.
It sure looks like that, and we talk about that on news and notes. But let's talk about the hires. Nick Caserio. I mean, look, they wanted him last year, and he's qualified, and he's coming from that Patriots way, the Patriots organization. However, that we know that they hired a search firm, and the search firm gave them 5 names, including names like Louis Riddick, and they didn't hire any of those 5, and then it was done under the secret cover of night and the private plane, and no one in the organization knew that they were bringing Caserio in except Jack Easterby. And if you don't know what the significance of that is, we brought it up a lot on the show. Jenny Rentis, Greg Bishop wrote an article about him, and he is still, Lance Zierlein, who knows what he's talking about, says Jack Easterby is still making calls to agents. He's still involved in football operations. Deshaun Watson doesn't want any part of this. In fact, via Adam Schefter, Deshaun Watson's camp puts out there, oh, they hired David Culley. That's great. We don't care. We still want out. In fact, we asked to get out weeks ago. David Culley, Ravens passing game coordinator. Again, watching the Ravens passing game, am I saying, yeah, whoever is behind that? But I'm sure in terms of a leader of men, in terms of somebody who matches and sees, there's things that I feel like we have to tiptoe around here, right? Because I think there's a monolithic culture idea in Houston right now that's kind of like a purity test. Either you pass the purity test or you don't.
Right.
So Culley's going to pass that purity test. Not really somebody who has experience yet at this level. I think there's a lot of people around the league that say it's great that he got that opportunity and that he deserved the opportunity. And I'm not going to argue with that. I just don't know what it does to address all of this stuff that we know about the internal workings of this organization that we should never know about any organization unless it is really falling apart. Like it's in a meltdown mode right now as far as the people in the building being on board with what the people at the top of the organization are doing. Lovie Smith's back. Okay. Again, see anachronism talking about the staff and with the Lions. Is Lovie in the Tampa 2 and his background? Is Lovie going to be like, why is everyone excited about Brandon Staley? We're going to talk about disguise, deception, mixing and matching looks. I don't know if that's Lovie right now. I don't know how the personnel they have right now fits. They did bring in Pep Hamilton, which is great if you're going to be grooming a quarterback from the start.
Yes. You'll need that.
You'll need that. You'll need Pep Hamilton.
And they might be losing J.J. Watt, by the way, speaking of Lovie's defense.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, who knows who's even going to be the cornerstones of this? Justin Reed? I mean, I don't even know. And then they keep Tim Kelly, and there was some talk that Tim Kelly had a good relationship with Deshaun Watson. Again, is this trying to patch something up that is already broken? So no new offensive coordinator there. And I guess I just have to say, I'm sorry, Texans fans. I'm sorry. But what you hope is that if the Deshaun Watson trade happens, and what you hope is if the Deshaun Watson trade doesn't happen, it really represents some sort of patching things up. But from what I understand, that would only start with Jack Easterby being ousted from any kind of football operations work. But it wouldn't end there. And it might even go back to like, can a player demand that the ownership changes? I mean, that's the level that we're at. And that's never a place that you want to be. But certainly we'll be watching all of this stuff closely as far as, fantasy football, man. I mean, like what kind of offense, what kind of players they're going to have here. But until that other shoe drops on Watson, it's all just speculation.
Yeah, and we'll see if Watson winds up in the AFC West. Yeah, hey, you want to be the team that doesn't have Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
And you've got Justin Herbert and Pat Mahomes.
Right.
Okay. Hey, Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Jacksonville time. And okay, we've seen this before. Maybe some of my opinions based on people I know aren't the kindest about Urban Meyer, but we'll see. We'll see, Bloom. It's interesting. It's a name. They've got $100 million in cap space. They'll have Trevor Lawrence. By the way, what's up with Brett Favre saying they shouldn't take Trevor Lawrence?
I don't know. Brett Favre also said people with money shouldn't give their opinions,
even though he's forced his way out of Green Bay. But anyway, so I asked the question last night. I was like, is Brett Favre back on the sauce? Like I'd say that half jokingly, but anyway, so it's going to be Trevor Lawrence. It's $100 million in cap space, and Urban Meyer and Trent Baalke. Okay, Jacksonville, go.
Okay, and Trent Baalke, I don't know. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. Urban Meyer, fascinating. Look, what have we been talking about for the last few years about Shad Khan? This is like his stepchild of the assets he has, right? He doesn't really care that much about the Jags. I called them the Weekend at Bernie's franchise. This year, he gave the stepchild a big birthday party, a big gift. Because whether this works out or not, Cease, this represents a massive investment in this franchise. And you can say it was wrong and it's not going to go anywhere. And also, let's not forget this, Cease, because we can go back to when the NFL expanded to Jacksonville and Carolina, right? And specifically Jacksonville, we can talk about. What was the worry? What was the worry about those franchises? How are they going to compete with SEC? How are they going to compete with college football? Right? How could they possibly like that? The people in that part of the country already have their loyalties. It's college football, and where Urban Meyer, Florida. I mean, Gainesville's right down the road from Jacksonville. A lot of those people in the Jacksonville fan base, I'm sure, overlap in the Venn diagram with Florida Gators fans. Bring back Charlie Strong, on his staff. Bring back the good old days. Urban Meyer is coming in. I mean, from a fantasy football side, we look at the spread offense and Trevor Lawrence. And let it also be said that I think it's pretty clear, Cease, that Urban Meyer looked at Trevor Lawrence, not the Jags, not the $100 million, not coming back to Florida, just looked at Trevor Lawrence and said, yeah, I'll take the job. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was, before he took the job or was ever connected to the job, talked about Trevor Lawrence. And I mean, Trevor Lawrence is that good. I mean, Trevor is a prospect. He's that good. And it's really exciting to consider what somebody who has been an offensive innovator can do. You also have Darrell Bevell. At least you get, and I think it makes sense, Cease, that that Urban Meyer is going to be more of like a CEO figurehead type, and I don't think he's going to be a super hands-on head coach. And Darrell Bevell's got a lot of experience. I'm not really sure I can say anything truly in Darrell Bevell's favor. Here's what's exciting too, by the way. They bring in Darrell Bevell as the offensive coordinator. Did you see the other hire they made on the offensive staff recently? Brian Schottenheimer, passing game coordinator. So I think of that, Cease, like conversations you have about your exes. Like you find out, like, oh yeah, like I was married to her. Really? I was her second husband. When you look at Pete Carroll with Darrell Bevell and Brian Schottenheimer, so that's fascinating to me. This is stuff that I say, raises an eyebrow here. That Schottenheimer's just deposed as the offensive coordinator over a difference in philosophy. Darrell Bevell, I don't know if he was truly like deposed, but I think again you have this idea. Pete Carroll has a clear picture of what the offense to be, and Bevell, Schottenheimer together, maybe spread their wings a little bit with Trevor Lawrence. I don't think it's going to be a ground and pound team. They get Jim Cullen, the Baltimore defensive line, and then there's been a lot of good play out of that group. So I think that you look at this, and it's reason for hope. I'm sorry, Joe Cullen. It's reason for hope for the Jags that your owner took the time out to land this big fish, because it took a little while. The first interviews and the first offers, and a few days passed, and people said, well, is that a bad sign? Because Urban's hemming and hawing. They were putting more money, I think, on the table than Gruden got per year. And then by the end of that week, they get it done. And again, whether you agree with it or not, it's not going to be a panacea for this franchise, but it is a sign that the owner is leaning in and doing something to shake things up, as they got this incredible break this year to get Trevor Lawrence. And certainly for fantasy football, we should be really excited. And for Jags fans, at least for the time being, there's a reason to be excited.
Yeah, Shad Khan's going to make you excited. So what's the Spanos family going to do with the Chargers?
Anybody out there will take only $2 million? We'll take $2 million.
Yeah, how about you? And Brandon Staley as their head coach. 2 years ago, Bloom, I was watching him coach the outside linebackers for the Broncos, and now he's the head coach in the division. but a head coach in a division. Now bringing on Joe Lombardi, also with, of course, Justin Herbert. So again, if you're a head coach and you can attach yourself to that guy, it's a pretty good decision, even if it is for $2 million.
Yeah, Brandon Staley. Again, I mean, he did a lot, and kudos to Sean McVay for identifying that talent, that coaching talent, and creating the number one defense with him. And again, deception, showing the quarterback one thing and then having them see something else. What beat Jared Goff? If you can't beat him, join him. Bill Belichick, it's great to see that Sean McVay is understanding that. Hey, when somebody makes me feel humbled as a coach, I want to know what they did. I want to understand it, and I'm going to use that. And that was Brandon Staley. Again, it's a limited track record of success, leadership, but I mean, you're right, Cease. I mean, you think of the Chargers, you automatically think, was it money? Was it just that was it that Brian Dable said, I paid my dues, I want $7 million a year or whatever. And Brandon Staley was like, well, I can be a head coach now? Okay. Where do I sign?
Yeah.
Joe Lombardi. Look, when Matthew Stafford was out there, and one of the teams that folks brought up was the Saints, because of the Joe Lombardi connection. Joe Lombardi was Stafford's offensive coordinator for 2 years. Many people said to me, no. Joe Lombardi being with the Saints is a reason that Matthew Stafford will not come there. Not a reason that he'll come there.
Right.
Is Joe Lombardi, based on what we've seen, the kind of offensive coordinator who get the most out of Justin Herbert? I don't know. Nibbles, death by 1,000 paper cuts, that kind of stuff. That's not Justin Herbert's game. And then, Cecil, I'll hand the mic back to you. A great opportunity for Ronaldo Hill to be working under Staley to pilot this defense as the defensive coordinator.
Right, and of course the inner workings of what he'll bring, because he'll bring a Fangio deception type of defense for what they're doing, and he'll have the talent. Now, what's Ingram free agent? Who was top of my head, because Bosa is wrapped up, believe, right?
Yeah, Ingram's a free agent.
Ingram's a free agent, so we'll see what they do. Maybe they get Von Miller, but it's going to be you're not going to have to worry about the defense. And honestly, when you look at Staley and you go attach yourself to that quarterback, remember they're always a combination. Is it Belichick or Brady? Well, it's both. And obviously Brady doing his own thing now, but still, like, it's a combination. So when you can have that part done, it makes sense, especially if you can skip to the front of the line like Staley did.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the Chargers have a lot of exciting pieces in place, and I'm interested to see what Brandon Staley will do as a head coach, because I really have no idea what it's going to look like.
Let's talk about the Jets and Robert Saleh, who many people applauded as the best hire of the head coaching hires. Well, we'll see what he does with the Jets now.
Yeah, it was such an interesting contrast, Cease, between Saleh, who a lot of people wanted in Detroit. He had a local connection. Another one that really would have been that flushing, that enema, that cleansing of the Matt Patricia era. Instead, he goes to the Jets. The Jets get their guy. And I think that everybody was going to say great hire wherever he was hired. What you see in Saleh is somebody who really gets his players to buy in. I mean, he's one of them. He's one of his players. No other coordinator in this league, when you watch a game, do you see a coordinator with the energy, with the emotion, with the intensity, with the engagement with the game that Robert Saleh has. Interestingly, in a contrast to Dan Campbell, in his presser, he's not talking about biting kneecaps. He's like, we're going to improve every day. We're gonna try to get better every day. So we'll see.
Do they do it with the Sam Darnold? That's the first
right,
question.
and that's the main thing here, right? Is that number 2 pick? And can we just say, I know we're fast forwarding Cease here. There's only one quarterback that they're going to seriously consider number 2, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Zach
yeah,
Wilson.
for sure.
Zach Wilson, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's just dispel all this stuff. If they take a quarterback at number 2, it's going to be Zach Wilson. Or they could say, let's give Darnold another year with the new coaching staff. Or they trade for Deshaun Watson. So you have Mike LaFleur, and Saleh's bringing his guys with him, right? We saw this with Staley. So that's another thing about Staley, and we're going to talk about Nick Sirianni last. So there are certain coaching hires that, I mean, should the number one, and see, you talk about the good old boys network, should the number one qualifier be, I've worked with you before? I mean, I get it. You have familiarity,
Trust, what have you.
but at the same time, just something that gives you pause. But, so you have these guys. Jeff Ulbricht's going to coordinate the defense. He was doing some great work with Raheem Morris. He's comes from the 49ers organization. And interestingly, you have Miles Austin as the wide receiver coach. He's never been a wide receiver coach in the NFL. Rob Calabrese is the quarterback coach. He's never been a quarterback coach in the NFL, But they bring in Greg Knapp, who to be a passing game consultant. So you have these younger coaches really for the first time at this level, but then you have an old farmhand like Greg Knapp. So combination of that. It's the Jets. I mean, the good thing about it's just like what Urban Meyer's got going on in Jacksonville. There's nowhere to go but up, right? You're going to have a lot of patience. I think Robert Saleh is somebody that a lot of people, kind of like Brad Holmes, a lot of people were rooting for him to get this opportunity. If they can get Saleh and land Watson, wow. I don't even know if we have seen a more striking whiplash 180 for a franchise in terms of who determines their future. So much like with this question for Houston, on the flip side of that, the Jets, it's hard to really analyze this upcoming year until we know what happens there. But suffice to say, there's hope finally for Jets fans.
You know what was pathetic, Bloom?
What?
The Broncos petitioned the NFL for Calabrese to play quarterback in that game that Kendall Hinton played.
Right.
Like, seriously, your quality control coach is going to... Can we just have a full-time quarterback?
Yeah. You have any insight on that, C, since he was, he's a quarterback coach. Now he was a quality control guy.
Yeah. And now coaching whoever the quarterback's going to be. So always very interesting, these connections. And part of NFL teams that want that good old boy network, Bloom, is they want the network part of it. Not just the good old boy part, which obviously plays a role as well. We'll see. Looks like we're up to Philadelphia. Is that right?
Last of the head coach.
Talk about Sirianni, and you talked about the prayer group or whatever, like the divinity test, or what'd you call it? Purity.
I called it a purity test.
There's one in Philadelphia too, thanks to Carson Wentz.
Well, right. It's based on Carson Wentz. It's not based on
Well, it's also
beliefs.
It's also based on Carson Wentz and just kind of the way Carson is. I'll tell you more stuff off the air.
Well, and it's interesting, Cease, because just this morning you have Mike Garofalo, I think, and others saying, well, you always watch the way these things are phrased, right? Because the way these things are phrased can tell you who it's coming from and maybe why you're hearing it.
Yes.
So the way it was phrased was, the Eagles will get calls about Carson Wentz. And Howie Roseman, well, he'll answer all the calls and listen to them. I mean, that's just what he does. Yeah. Of course he will. Which is just interesting because it sure seemed like they got to a fork in the road of Doug Peterson or Carson Wentz. And they picked Wentz. But then you hire a head coach, and speaking of purity tests like we talked about, it does not seem like from the rhetoric that they said you have to work with Wentz if you're hired. Even though it's clear that Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman chose Wentz. Nick Sirianni saying open competition, every position, and we'll see. Now, it's fascinating to me that Wentz would be even considered a commodity at all. And maybe the calls they're going to take are calls like the Jared Goff, Brock Osweiler, like, well, if you give us a third, we'll take him off your hands if it's Frank Reich. But I have a feeling, Cease, and this is where it baffles us, right? Because Nick Foles got, someone traded a fourth round for Nick Foles' contract. Speaking of Eagles quarterbacks last year when he was terrible for the Jaguars in 2019. So maybe we don't read this the way that we thought. Before Sirianni got hired, I would have said Carson Wentz automatically week one starting quarterback for the Eagles. Now, well, there's some stuff to unwind here, but look at the patterns. Look at the patterns here. Jeffrey Lurie, who, by the way, Jeffrey Lurie, by all means, if we were to rank the 32 owners and like owners that I think I could actually like have a beer with and enjoy the conversation, he's up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's up there. But they decide to part ways with Andy Reid. Like, this has run its course. They go in with Chip Kelly. They give Chip Kelly way too much power. One of the first great examples of before Bill O'Brien, there's Chip Kelly in terms of don't give a head coach king-like power over the organization. This is Bill Belichick, although we see more and more of that, and in some cases it's going well. So what happens whenever they say, ooh, this was bad, this Chip Kelly thing was bad? They get Andy Reid's right-hand man. So it's almost like, well, we can't get Andy Reid back now, but we can get the Russian nesting doll inside of Andy Reid, right? Right? And Doug Peterson, and they get a Super Bowl. Then things go south with Wentz. So a lot of people say, well, that's because Peterson wasn't really the genius behind that. It was Frank Reich. So what do they get now? The Russian nesting doll inside of Frank Reich. Not exactly a visionary approach to hiring head coaches, but hey, they won a Super Bowl finally, so we can't say that it's misguided. Nick Sirianni, I think, like Brandon Staley, just thrilled to have the opportunity. How would you not say yes to that? Even though, like the Texans, it was seen as a toxic situation to come into. Because why did the previous coach leave? Because the owner and GM are basically telling him, either do this or you're fired. And Peterson said, well, fine, I'm going to say no. I think Peterson almost wanted to be fired, honestly. He wanted to be able to turn the page. He'll be wanted. Maybe it will be a year, but he'll be wanted, and we'll see him surface again. So Nick Sirianni worked under Frank Reich with the Chargers, and he has the job of, I don't know. See, again, it's like fumigating the organization from whatever bad feelings are left from how things went, how you go from winning the Super Bowl. But again, and maybe most prominently of any of these head coaching jobs, the test was, have you worked with Nick Sirianni? Shane Steichen? Okay. I mean, I get it because he worked with him, but based on Chargers, well, I don't know. Nah. Jonathan Gannon coming from the Colts. I mean, again, I think that he's going to be in familiar, comfy surroundings, but see, when you have these hires like a Brandon Staley, like a Nick Sirianni, these guys that are still in their 30s and have never really even been close to a head coaching job in the NFL, wouldn't you love to see them bring in someone like Wade Phillips as defensive coordinator? Somebody who has head coaching experience. Somebody
Wade
who
said he wanted back in too.
I don't understand. So we'll see, Eagles. You got that Super Bowl championship. I think nobody could have predicted this is where they would be just a few years removed from that. We'll see. And they lose Deuce Staley out of the organization. Remember, there's a lot of talk that maybe this was going to be Deuce's turn. We'll see. I mean, this has been anytime in this year, 2021 season, anytime your team is mentioned in the same breath with the Texans, it's not a good thing. But good luck, Dick.
Good luck. Carson Wentz would fit in the divinity test with Houston. Right? He would.
Yeah.
Okay, let's George Paton with the Broncos, Bloom. Just know he's a good man. He's thorough. He makes his decisions without emotion, and he's already was in on Matthew Stafford. The Broncos thought they were going to get him. Foolishly, my opinion, the Broncos wanted a second-round pick back along with, and the Lions, I believe, were asking for Jerry Jeudy in addition to Drew Lock, and they were like, and Lock wasn't because the spin doctors, which are always they're always work. They always work for the Broncos, and they love carrying the water for the Broncos, and then they get mad when you point out that they carry water for the Broncos. But they were saying, oh, once the Lions brought up Locke, it was a deal breaker. No, it wasn't. Jeudy was the deal breaker. Because Locke, then George Paton, how do I put this, Bloom? Let's just say George Paton probably sees very clearly what Drew Lock
he's a good football guy. Look, here's what I want to say about George Paton. Everybody wanted him. Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted him.
It was so good. I wrote an article with 24 candidates, and I didn't include George Paton because I thought he was too good for the Broncos.
He was going. It was clear. Coming up under Rick Spielman in Minnesota, he was going to pick his job. He was going to wait for the GM job that he wanted. And Broncos fans, and there's some in the chat room, of course. Hey, what's up, Celine and others? If you want to have faith in this organization, you want to see what John Elway can still contribute, even though he's in a ceremonial job now. It's the scene at the Elway Steakhouse, sitting with George. and Vic Fangio ordering a burger. Anyway, it's good burgers. There are good burgers in steakhouses. Don't get me wrong. And John Elway, you have to think, had at least a little bit. And if it comes to pass, they get Deshaun Watson. John Elway's going to play a role in that too.
He has to. Yeah.
Yeah. Because John Elway can make someone feel like this is the right place for you. And I think John Elway had to be a big part of George Paton saying, yep, this is the job I've been waiting for.
Yep. And don't worry about John. He's going to, after he gets Deshaun Watson, he's going to sit on a boat like Tahoe.
As he should.
Yeah, because people are like, he's going to be over Peyton Show. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's cleared out his office. I think he's sharing an office right now, but he's not going to be in the building. He's not going to be over Peyton's shoulder. And pretty soon there'll be a new owner for the Broncos. Pretty soon there'll be a new head coach and new offensive coordinator. So there's been some misconceptions like John's going to be over. No, John Elway's going to get him set up, and then he's going to make $6 million this year for not being there.
For hanging out at a steakhouse with people.
Yeah, there you go. Elway's has great steak. I prefer Shanahan's, but it's close. It's very, very close. Let's talk about what? Carolina?
Yeah, well, Scott Fitterer from the Seattle organization, their new GM, not Marty Herney. Who was also not the GM in Washington. Just know this: Carolina was in deep on Stafford. The number 8 pick was on the table. I think,
and they were sneaky about it.
Yeah. So there's no let's get our bearings. We have a new GM. There's aggression there, and maybe that's from Matt Rule, but that was certainly interesting to see. So, coming out, I think Seattle's been an organization. Cecil, we're talking about personnel management. We're talking about draft, maybe not first-round draft picks, but otherwise, Scott Fitterer brings with him a pretty good track record for what this team's done over the last decade or so.
Washington brings in Mayhew to help run things, which, well, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and another third-round pick for San Francisco, a minority candidate. We've seen him before, former player, seen him in Detroit. Washington did not really make a strong run at Matthew Stafford. I remember Mayhew was the one that drafted Matthew Stafford. I shouldn't say that they didn't make a strong run. They said number 19 in the third-round pick. So they were one of the two teams along with Carolina, kind of the runners-up to the Rams. So they did make a move for Stafford, but not the kind of move that shows me that they think they're just Stafford away from contending, but not Kyle Smith, by the way. Kyle Smith, who was kind of in not a co-GM, but it was really interesting to hear that last year in the draft, they're like, well, you don't have a GM. How are you going to handle the draft? And Ron Rivera said, yeah, Kyle and I are going to, kind of drive this thing together. Well, he did not get the GM job, so now he is the vice president of player personnel for Atlanta under Terry Fontenot. So it's something to watch there. But for Washington, again, at least they didn't try to do Panthers North with Marty Herney, as it was rumored, and they got Martin Mayhew.
San Francisco's got some changes to their staff we got to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about with coordinators. So, and some of it's interesting and some of it's not, right? So we don't make the show go like over an hour. But I know you want to talk about Miami. But San Francisco, they're promoting from within. Mike McDaniel, now the offensive coordinator, with Mike LaFleur, who was handling the pass game, McDaniel, the run game coordinator, now offensive coordinator in San Francisco, and D'Amico Ryans. Remember him? Texans fans remember him. Now the defensive coordinator. A lot of people saying he's going to be a head coach in a few years. And you just keep promoting from within. And again, this is a team. And Cease, here's something to think about. Green Bay's been in the NFC title game for the last 2 years. We can mention, by the way, Green Bay doesn't have a defensive coordinator right now. Mike Pettin's out. As far as I know, at this moment, they haven't hired anybody. Nobody talks about Green Bay's coordinators as head coach candidates. San Francisco, even though they came off a down year this year, you see that their coaches are coveted. Hey, Kyle Shanahan. Sean Desai taking over for Chuck Pagano, who retired. Happy trails to Chuck. I think he's one of the good guys, Some continuity there. Dan Quinn. Let's talk about this one a little bit. Dan Quinn, Dallas defensive coordinator. At least it's not Mike Nolan. Could this be one of those one seats where he ran his course as a head coach, and we reminded, because we'll talk about Gus Bradley too, that Seattle defensive coaching tree,
right,
that was so hot for a while, and it's kind of run its course. But can Dan Quinn clean this up at all?
Yeah, he can clean it up. And just know this also, and we mentioned this, I believe, in one of our shows, Bloom, but Jerry's excited about moves and trades, and we'll see what that could possibly net things there. Who do we got before we get to Miami? Because as you mentioned, I just want to talk about Miami.
So let me run these up. Todd Downing, so Tennessee promoting from within. Todd Downing, offensive coordinator. 2020, they go without a defensive coordinator. Not necessarily a great idea. Go back and zip some. It's Tennessee. Play all your fantasy players against Tennessee. So they get Shane Bowen. They promote him from within. Marcus Brady promoted from within for the Colts offensive coordinator to replace Nick Sirianni. Raheem Morris to replace Brandon Staley.
Okay.
Sean McVay.
I like it.
Yeah. Gus Bradley in, bringing a lot of his assistants with him from the Chargers to Las Vegas for their defense. Minnesota hasn't hired an offensive coordinator yet. I think Clint Kubiak's name is still floating around there, but we'll see.
Tolbert was
Tyke
interviewed,
Tolbert,
and Tyke will come from the Kubiak tree, so they're keeping West Coast concepts. Are they keeping Kirk Cousins though?
Right. Oh, our Steelers.
Next.
Well, okay, Matt Canada, new offensive coordinator, Matt Canada, which at least in some sense signifies.
Everyone says that's great for Anthony McFarland.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think it's good for the running game. I think it definitely signifies the Steelers want to establish the run.
Good. Ben's done.
Yeah, and he'll play this year. Ben's saying, "I'll play for whatever. Give him $1 and see if he or the vet minimum. See if he really is going to do that." That's what I would do. But Matt Canada is, look. If there was anything innovative in the Steelers' offense last year, it was probably because of Matt Canada. Pre-snap motions. Different, more exotic formations and things like that. And it is going to mean the running game. The Steelers are going to draft a running back. I hope they draft. Here's what you do. I think Matt Williamson had a scenario like this. Trade out of the first to get some future picks, draft a running back in the second round. I won't be surprised if that's what the Steelers do. John Clem. Someone brought this up. So really, the Steelers could have brought in an established. They could have tried to bring in an established offensive line coach. Instead, they bring in Clem. Someone brought this up. Adrian Clem, I'm sorry. They bring in Adrian Clem, who was the assistant to Sarrett. So now you go from Munchak to Sarrett to Clem. And someone said, Clem, wasn't he the offensive line coach for UCLA when Brett Hundley was sacked 12 times in a game that one time? Steelers neurosis. Seattle, after they ushered out Brian Schottenheimer, Shane Waldron is now the pass game coordinator, I think, under Sean McVay. Baltimore, I just wanted to bring up that Rob Ryan's back. Yeah, you brought up Rex Ryan.
Yeah.
Rob Ryan's back. They got to replace Joe Cullen, the defensive line coach. I also know Anthony Weaver, who was a interim defensive coordinator, did some work there. Also, DeAnton Lynn, Anthony Lynn's son, is their new pass defense coordinator. Interesting there. Mm-hmm. And we get to Miami. Co-offensive. This isn't run game, pass game coordinator.
Yeah.
This is co-offensive coordinator. See, it's like if there's two girls that you're dating and you want to really commit to one, and you say, "Well, I can't commit to either of you. Would you both be my girlfriend and be okay with it?" I don't know. See, please tell me this isn't what it looks like from the outside.
Yeah, this is a cluster. That's what it's looking like. Because Eric Studesville has been an interim head coach before with the Broncos. He's been an offensive assistant, an assistant head coach, like all these sorts of things. He's been working towards getting an OC job besides just being a running backs coach and then having a secondary title. And then they give him this to go with the tight ends coach as well here. The tight ends coach,
George Godsey. Yeah.
George Godsey, right?
Also quarterback coach in his resume, yeah.
And you'll look at what do they do with Tua if they keep Tua. Is Tua on his way to Houston? If they have Deshaun Watson, that makes things a lot more interesting. And both of them had success with their respective positions. So you can't even say, well, is this better for the running backs or is it better for the passing game? It's just odd
Well, there has to be a play caller.
Decision, right? There has to be someone making that.
They
call.
Can't actually be deciding together. Like all best decisions are made by committee. Like it can't actually be during a game. Like somebody has to have authority, and it can't even be like on first down you make the calls, on second down I make the calls, alternate drives. Like I just hope that when it's all said and done, it will look more like a pass game, run game coordinator split, and somebody will be the play caller, because otherwise this is going to create. There's a reason that the organizational charts are important, just because it gives people a predictability or clarity, you know. And that I just, okay, no one's ever tried this before. I'm not saying it's not going to work, but this is something that is going to require somebody to say this is how it's going to be. And whenever you have co-offensive coordinators, it almost seems like you're saying we're not willing to do that.
Has there been a committee that's worked?
Right.
Like, hey, I don't know. All right, we'll see. We'll see what the quarterback market's going to be crazy. And that's what's going to either highlight or low light these type of hires. So, you know, and then the thing I love about Tua Bloom is that unlike Drew Lock, who comes out and blames the media because it's just easy to think that you can play quarterback, Tua on Mad Dog Radio was like, yeah, I need to be better. I need to work harder. I need to come through. I need to produce. And I like seeing that from that young man. Everybody follow Chris Kaufman because he's a great guy. At CK Parrott, right?
Yeah.
So Chris is a great guy, great mind for football, great sources, great insight. And, he's been leading why are you jumping off Tua's bandwagon now? This was their plan, was to get Tua. And then all of a sudden people after a year, like, he wasn't good enough. Like, no. Just sit tight with Tua unless you can get Deshaun Watson, because this type of quarterback never comes up.
Yeah.
This isn't Peyton Manning after 4 neck surgeries. This isn't Jay Cutler, like getting traded for 2 firsts, right? This is Champ Bailey. I asked Champ Bailey last night, what do you think about the Broncos getting Deshaun Watson? He said, without a doubt, will change the fortunes of your franchise.
For a generation, for like a decade.
Yep. So we'll see. Bloom, did we get them all?
I think so. I hope so, folks. And all this stuff. The beautiful thing is, and Jason Wood does a lot of great work on coaching changes on the site. I'm going to do a show with Jason to get his perspective, maybe a quasi couch, off-season couch. And this is just setting the tones, setting the scene of what's next. We're going to learn more as we see what teams do in free agency, or sees $185 million cap, what they do for some of these teams just to get under the cap. We're going to see what they do in the draft. We're going to hear, I think we're going to have something like OTAs this year. I think by then we'll be okay enough to have OTAs. Maybe enough players will be vaccinated or something like that. So the point is, this is that starting point in the story of some sort of reset. Although, there are teams that are just promoting from within, but we still want to hear what these guys have to say, hear what the coaches are saying about them, see what the directions are, setting the scene for the next chapter for these franchises. And it's good. I'm glad we can say, hey, there's hope for the Jets and Jags, in some ways, cease the gossipy reality TV, tabloid dramas of the Texans and Eagles are also compelling to see where those franchises go. And, that gives, in some ways, can give the players the idea of it's us against the world, which sometimes can be the most powerful thing for a team, to have some sense of being like a siege from the outside. The media doesn't get us, the fans don't get us, but we get each other. So it's always fascinating, every chapter for these franchises, for these players. And this is where the changes for 2021 begin. And this is that eve of the Super Bowl. Cecil will come back with a Super Bowl preview tomorrow, folks. And we're ready. That's the NFL, man. I mean, when Bill Belichick won the Super Bowl, Cecil, how many days do you think he took off?
0.
None. None. Yeah. He's like, we're behind. We're
right.
behind. All the other teams have already had time to start preparing for next year.
Yeah.
So it's a little taste if you want to think like you're in the NFL. Well, if you're just learning some of these names and you're behind, but we're behind, and we're doing our best to keep you in the know.
You know what would help Tua the most? Devonta Smith.
Number 3.
Book it.
Yeah. Pen.
Yeah. All right, that's a wrap. Be back tomorrow with our Super Bowl preview. I know Saline was wanting us to make our Super Bowl predictions. That's tomorrow.
Suspense.
Yes, the suspense. It is getting to us. I think the exhaustion's getting to me. So that's a wrap for today's program, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for listening to the Audible. Do all those YouTube things like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. He's Sigmund. I'm Cecil. We're the Audible. Stay tuned and stay frosty.